Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss best practices with virtualization and data center consolidation strategies in the federal government. With me today on the show are Ray Brow, the Division Chief for Enterprise Server Operations Centers at U.S. Department of State. Zach Baldwin, the Program Manager for Federal Data Center Consolidation at GSA. Darren House, Technologist at Unicom Government, formerly GTSI. Tim LeMaster, the Senior Director of System Engineering, Federal Juniper Networks. And Julie Lockner, the Vice President with Go-to-Market Strategy at Informatica Corporation. Let's get into the discussion. Let's talk first about progress. Data center consolidation's been around now for quite some time. It's been a hot topic. Let's hear a little bit about where some areas of progress are being made. Let's start with you, Ray Brow, over U.S. Department of State. Give us some ideas of where you see progress being made at State.
Sure, thanks, Jim. In terms of virtualization and data center consolidation, the first thing that we try to do at Department of State is we keep them a little bit separate. We don't see them as exactly the same things. They support one another, but they're not identical. Our programs are managed somewhat separately so that we can focus on both because they have some unique characteristics. And just to give you an update on virtualization, we started our virtualization effort before the FDCCI, the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative, around 2004, 2005. Currently, about 43% of all of our servers are virtualized, and in our most active data center, we're up to about 58%. We're targeting 70% virtualization across the board. When we originally started this, we were talking about 100% virtualization. I think we've come to our senses and realized that that's not going to happen.
Right.
So we're about 70%. There are some applications that will need to be on real servers, and we've come to accept that. In terms of consolidation, we have closed a number of data centers. Unfortunately, they're mostly the data centers that we controlled entirely.
Right.
There still are data centers that have quite a bit of communication things in them and other stuff, if you will.
Right.
It's becoming a little bit of an uphill battle. We are making progress. We're pleased with the progress, but it does seem like the battle is changing a little bit.
Yeah, I think I've sensed that too. I think right out of the box there was this big, movement, but then some reality began setting in on some of the things that might not be quite as easy as originally thought. Zach Baldwin, GSA, you have a role overseeing government-wide data center programs here in progress. Can you give us some ideas where you're seeing some progress being made?
I think we've seen a lot of progress in agencies getting a true view of all their IT assets across the enterprise. When we started out, we had about 2,000 data centers identified. We are well above that. We're seeing that agencies often had disparate bureaus. Each one has their own data, CIO, their own budget.
Right.
So a lot of IT sprung up, scattered around an agency, scattered around a country. So I think just identifying all those assets at the highest level and being able to address all those in an enterprise manner is a major step in creating this. Also getting into now our merger with Portfolio Stat, and we're moving away from just counting closures and going towards looking at optimizing real metrics in core data centers instead of just closures. We're going to stick to closing 40% of non-core data centers, but right now we're going to look at reporting on and optimizing enterprise services, which is the way managing IT has evolved.
Yeah, that's great. You both point what you said and Ray said about just getting better ideas of the baseline and what's out there. It's something that, if you go back prior to these initiatives, oftentimes a lot of agencies weren't even aware of the totality of what was out there. So a lot of progress being made, which hopefully leads to additional progress. Tim LeMaster over at Juniper. Tim, I would guess, knowing Juniper, that data center consolidation, virtualization are pretty high on priorities. How are you guys stepping up to help the government move forward with these data center consolidations and virtualization?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jim. Data center consolidation has been one of the primary focus areas for Juniper for a couple years now. It's really the real motivation behind one of our primary products that we sell into these data center consolidation solutions, which is our fabric-based switching solution that we call QFabric. So I think the area that we really focus on is data center simplification, trying to reduce the number of levels of complexity in a data center through our QFabric, which allows you to create a single tier architecture in the data center, or our virtual chassis solution, which is has a similar approach, which takes essentially disparate Ethernet switches and allows you to manage those as one device, again, simplifying the data center and reducing the amount of complexity in the data center. Not just the number of devices, but the number of interactions between devices is important there.
Yeah, you know, if, and had this discussion quite a bit, if you're going to do data center consolidation, move things, you don't want to move stuff from one location to the other and wind up with the same stuff in another location. You want to look at ways to streamline, to modernize, to reduce complexity, as you mentioned, and take advantage of the newer technologies that are out there. Julie Lockner over at Informatica. I mean, I think Informatica, it being big in infrastructure kinds of things, so I imagine these issues are big for you too in terms of priorities. Can you talk a little bit about how Informatica is stepping up to support these programs?
Sure. So I've spent the last six years working with commercial organizations doing these data center consolidations since 2008. We see the IT budgets are flat and not growing. I joined Informatica about a year ago because Informatica focuses on the data layer, right? So we're looking at the applications, we're looking at data duplication, and one of the challenges that the government agencies are facing is that the business users want to continue to have access to data. So when you're doing data center consolidation, you have to think about things like making sure that data is always available, that the applications are still accessible. But yet what happens is a lot of these agencies have built applications in silos, so there's a lot of redundancy, there's a lot of duplication. And so what we do at Informatica is help those agencies with their application inventory look for duplication and create ways or strategies to retire those redundant or legacy applications, but still let the business users or the people that are accessing those applications still have access to the data. Because at the end of the day, I mean, if they're familiar with the information that they have access to, they're gonna be much more supportive of these data center consolidation initiatives.
Yeah, well said. You know, I was in a discussion not too long ago about the importance of data governance and data quality and understanding what you really have, because a lot of not only redundant data but missing data, and when you look at the fact that decisions are made based on this data, you know, you could be making incorrect decisions if you don't have the data quality in place. So important issues. Darren House at Unicom Government, can you talk a little bit about how you are positioned to support some of these initiatives around data centers and virtualization?
Sure. So first thing I want to say is that we know consolidation is not fast, it's not easy, and it's not free. So there's a lot of complexity involved in consolidating and moving applications, and one of the things that we do is we use our vendor relationships to be able to try and find multi-vendor solutions to try and help solve some of the consolidation issues with conversion infrastructure, with data management, with application dependency mapping, these types of things that are required to get the planning done for consolidation before you do the moving. It's very important to try and virtualize first because it's easier to move once you're virtualized. These are some of the lessons learned over time. These are the things we try and bring to help our customers identify where they can go and what they can do and what the options are, and doing best case scenarios and worst case scenarios so they understand the risks and the costs, and then they can make the decision that's best for their agency. Yeah,
great. Also great points. We're off to a good roll here. You know, it's easy to picture in your head, you know, the end state with all these data centers consolidate, fewer data centers. But getting from the current state to that end state, there's an awful lot of things in the middle there that need to be done. And an important point you just made about getting the planning and the concepts of operations and things like that in place. I've seen several agencies where they've consolidated and now they have chaos because they don't know how they're going to do, who pays what and shared cost and what service level agreements, and it's causing a lot of issues in the agency because they didn't do that upfront planning. Good points. Let's switch over and talk about benefits. Why are we doing all this? What kind of benefits we can get out of this? Is it all about money, or do we see other benefits? Let's start with Zach Baldwin at GSA this time. Zach, what are some of the big benefits you hope to achieve when this consolidation effort reaches its intended destination, I guess?
I think that's always a driver, especially in this budget environment that we're in, to save money for the American taxpayer. And this is certainly, having thousands of data centers, server closets around the country, often doing duplicative things and unrationalized apps. Certainly saving money, but there are a lot of benefits. Greener, less energy use, getting your security under a blanket of a similar security profile. And we have closed 420 data centers so far. I think moving into bigger data centers and more application rationalization, I really like your point on that, because one of the big reasons we've merged portfolio stat and the data center consolidation is you can't do data center consolidation without mapping and rationalizing apps. And I think getting rid of duplicative apps and things like that are going to be a major part and a major cost savings and benefit to this.
Absolutely. Ray Brow, at State Department, what do you think are some benefits you see that you might be able to add to the points that Zach laid out for us?
One of the benefits that we've seen, particularly from data center consolidation, is higher availability. At the Department of State, we took the opportunity to upgrade some of our data centers as we consolidated. I think, as maybe you mentioned, Jim, you don't want to take everything and move it from point A to point B and end up with something that isn't as good. So the higher availability has been good for consolidation. On the virtualization front, we also have higher availability there as well. The virtual infrastructure is such that if we're now at the point where if a server fails, it'll actually come up on another machine within 2 minutes automatically. 2 minutes of downtime is no fun, don't misunderstand me, but that's substantially better than it was. The downside of that is that if we do lose one of the virtual hosts, we lose almost an entire data center right there in one shot. So you can see hundreds of machines go down. But higher availability has been one of the big things. Another important component we've gotten from the consolidation is the move toward more centralized management. Some of the stovepipes that have existed, we've negotiated and worked with people. We have demonstrated that we can manage their applications in a way that satisfies their service requirements. Centralized management of data centers, centralized management of virtualization is a stepping point forward into better management and to get to the point where we can actually do that application optimization. I see us trying to move up the stack, owning the data center, owning the infrastructure applications, then not owning the applications, but owning the services that they need in order to rationalize. Right.
Very good. Well said. And then the program officers can focus on the program and not worry about the infrastructure. Darren House, what do you think of some of the benefits you're seeing coming out of virtualization, data center consolidations, and some of the efforts you're working on? What are some of the benefits you're seeing being achieved by government and as well as with your own company?
So the perspective that I have on this, there's a lot of the basic benefits, the consolidation ratios, the reduced costs, the operational efficiency that you can get. Those are well-known benefits. I think there's some other benefits that come out as this progresses over the years, and I would say it starts with the standardization and the virtualization that are necessary to really achieve consolidation. They drive the compression of compute resources in a rack space, so more compute per rack unit is the measurement you use. This stuff brings reduced infrastructure and power and cooling requirements, but all this stuff kind of starts driving the ability to effectively baseline and create templates and create automation scripts and stuff like that to create even more operational efficiency over time. It also puts pressure on trying to align the application and the data with the mission or administrative value of that data to have a better business technology alignment that can create better performance requirements for the applications, that can streamline SLAs, can streamline contractual relationships, those types of things, as well as every application is different, so we can't assume that they're all the same. There's differentiated applications, and there has to be a business value or mission value associated with those, and this is how the consolidation is pushing things up to realize that there's this relationship, and it's a very strong one. The sooner you start realizing that relationship, the more you're going to get benefit from it.
Right, so what I'm take away from that is you see this putting in place sort of the platform, if you will, for continuous improvement processes, and over time you'll just continue to fine-tune this and make continue improvements in the organization.
Absolutely, and the one point I would like to make on the whole portfolio stat and FDCCI getting moved under that, I think that's going to be a very big driver for this. It's going to help a lot. I think it was a great move, and I think that will help accelerate this as well.
Great, sounds great. great. Julie Lockner, what do you think are some of the benefits perhaps that you can add to the discussion here?
Sure. I mean, Darren had just mentioned something that's really important, and it's a term that I use, information lifecycle management or application lifecycle management. You align the value of the application, the use of the technology with the investment that you make on the infrastructure. And when you have waste associated with multiple applications, redundant applications, if you can eliminate that waste, you can free up resources, you can free up maintenance costs, storage costs, resource people's time to invest in some of the innovations that we heard about for better uptime, server upgrades. So right now, with the federal government's budget being flat and really constrained, application rationalization, information lifecycle management, these are strategies that free up those resources that can refund fund these new technology innovations. This is really the biggest benefit I think that's offering the government right now, because there's not more money coming into the budget. You want to use the money that you have better, and the best way to do it is stop wasting money on apps that people aren't using. Right.
I mean, companies that I work with now, I mean, the first thing I say to them is, if you have an idea, it better save more money than it costs.
That's right.
And do it within a very short period of time, not savings 3 years out. I mean, it's got to be very
immediate.
ROIs within months.
And in that example, if you have 10 applications sitting on a rack or a server that's been virtualized, but they're redundant, if you could retire all of those apps, put the functionality or the data in the new application on new innovative technology, that's an immediate savings right there.
Right. There are thousands of stories of savings that I'm hear about all the time. The struggle, a little struggle in government, we'll talk about it maybe a little bit later, but is just getting the procurement processes, and there's a change in the way service models are different than the old models, and it's a new challenge for the acquisition folks also. But Tim LeMaster over at Juniper, what can you add to the discussion here on benefits you're seeing? It's always difficult being the final speaker on a question, because that's right. You can say ditto plus. What can you add to the ditto?
Well, certainly there have been a lot of great points made around the table as we've talked through this. But one of the key benefits that we see our customers getting from this approach and this data center consolidation is just business agility, the ability to respond faster to the customer needs, to spin up new services in a much more efficient way, rather than having to provision a large number of assets to respond to customer needs. But this data center consolidation has to enable a lower total cost of ownership as well, and so that's an important aspect that you have to consider as you're building out the infrastructure to support this.
Yeah, terrific. I want to talk too a little bit about how cloud computing and managed services, it seems to be a craze now for everything as a service. I mean, storage as a service, and application development as a service, and so forth. So I want to get in and talk a little bit about how cloud and managed services fits in with the strategies. But before we do that, we're going to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Ray Brow from Department of State, Zach Baldwin from GSA, Darren House from Unicom Government, Tim LeMaster from Juniper, and Julie Lockner from Informatica Corp. We're talking data center consolidation and virtualization. We talked about progress being made, and we talked about some of the key benefits that are anticipated coming out of these efforts. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other hot topics. Everyone's talking cloud computing, everyone's talking managed services. I'm wondering, do they factor into your data center consolidation strategies? Are they part of the strategy? Let's start with Zach Baldwin over at GSA. As you look at the federal landscape and all these data center consolidations, how does cloud and managed services and things like that fit into the strategies?
Well, I do work in the cloud computing PMO, so I am a proponent of cloud computing. But in the data center consolidation arena, I see it as there's there's logical steps to consolidating a data center: map your applications, migrate your applications, and then there has to be somewhere you take those applications. So as we're looking at identifying core enterprise data centers across agencies, we're going to do cost modeling, bring it down to how much does it cost to deliver an operating system from that data center. So you can do a real comparison of, should I take this application to the cloud? Is it cheaper to bring it into an enterprise data center? So I see cloud computing as a really important platform for the government to use, especially certain applications that are, cyclical damage. But it's just another option as to where you can migrate your applications as you're becoming more efficient and more cost effective in using those applications.
Right. Of course, we've done some shows on cloud and managed services, and and it gets a little fuzzy when you get into private clouds, public clouds, hybrid clouds. An agency that's a cloud for other agencies, and so forth and so forth. So it gets somewhat fuzzy where the demarcation is there. What do you think, Ray Brow over at Department of State? How does cloud and managed services strategies fit into your data center strategies?
Well, since I'm responsible for the data centers, if they move to the cloud, I'm out of a job. So I'm fundamentally against it. Just joking. We're responsible for the private cloud, if we could say that internally. And as we look at cloud, as Zach said, the driving force is really cost. It's wherever people need to put their applications, the question is where are they going to get the best value. And so the thing that we've focused on in the last 2 years is to put a very, very solid chargeback solution in place so that we know where every penny goes. We know what it costs for our SAN. We know what it costs for our compute power, and we work very hard to do this. At that point, our customers can come to us and they can say exactly what is it costing me in your data center, and then they can begin to do the comparative analysis. And there's a tremendous amount of marketing appeal out there to cloud. I don't know how much of it is real or not, but the point is we can tell them, here's what it costs you when you're in our data center. Now you have a baseline to compare for.
Yeah. Well, just getting a handle of the cost is something. And are you able to measure energy costs too and things like that?
Actually, energy costs that was one of the easier ones. We've been measuring that for about 2 or 3 years, actually measuring it on a consistent basis. So, yeah, that was one of the easier ones. You just stick a meter on the great big pipe that goes into the data center, and you know what that costs. All the way down to the rack, we don't do that. We do it all the way to in between the power source and the rack, which is sufficient for us. We know what the data center itself costs.
Right. Julie, Informatica, how do you guys view cloud and you managed service kinds of issues as you look at the way you're supporting your government customers here and putting it together with the data center consolidation programs?
I look at it really 3 ways. The first one is when organizations are moving to an application or migrating to an application that's residing on cloud. You touched on some of the key things that people need to consider. If you're going to move to a cloud application, are you moving the right data? Are you moving quality data? It's not just picking up a system and moving it to the cloud. You want to make sure that you do the analysis and that you're not creating bad quality data. So what Informatica does in that respect from a migration perspective is offer data integration in the cloud. So if you have a cloud application that's in the public environment, you can connect to it using a cloud data integration technology, build in your data quality rules before you migrate the data into the new application. The second part is around utilization. The enemy before was utilization, server utilization, and the whole value proposition of cloud technology is to maximize your infrastructure utilization. And before it was almost like a bad game of Tetris where you had a lot of open blocks and people weren't using technology that you were paying for. Right? And with technology like application retirement, data archive, you can actually take those empty blocks and fill them up with data that's very consolidated, very compressed, but still accessible and available. So you're really getting much better utilization. The third part that you mentioned was the chargeback. I think what cloud has brought to the government agency is a much better way to measure the utilization. Before, people were looking at, as you mentioned, power being consumed by the data center, but not having the level of granularity at the application level. When you look at things like data warehousing or reporting, when you're feeding data into these large servers, you have a much better idea of how much is being consumed by those servers. You have a much better assessment of what that data is costing an organization. So you can actually put dollars on a query. So how much does this query cost, or how much does this analytics project cost? And we wouldn't be able to provide that kind of chargeback metric without cloud technology. So there's really a lot of benefits that we're seeing at the data layer.
Yeah, terrific. Some great points there. Great points. Tim LeMaster, what do you think in terms of cloud, managed services, data center consolidation, virtualization? You know, they all seem to have interfaces or connections. How do you view it over at Juniper?
Well, one of the things that that really drives a lot of what happens in the data center for consolidation is virtualization, and we all talk about that quite a lot. But virtualization, is, for all the value and benefits it offers, also changes the dynamics in the data center quite a bit. As VMs move from one area of the data center to another, the latency that the users and the applications see as a result of those VMs moving around in the data center can have a big impact on your SLAs or how your customers experience the applications and services that you're providing. So that's an area of focus for Juniper. We've spent a lot of time trying to, as I said earlier, simplify the data center, reduce the number of layers within the data center to make a more consistent response time or service across that data center so that the experience that the customer sees is very consistent. And our QFabric solution that we've introduced was really focused on that, having a single consistent architecture across the entire data center to create a latency that is constant or very well understood.
Right, right. Well, good points there. Darren House, what do you think in terms of cloud and managed services and things like that as they relate to the things you're doing to work with your customers?
Well, we believe that those things are great tools in a tool bag.
Okay.
So there's a lot of tools, and we all have the same adage. We understand that use the right tool for the right job, you get a good job done. If you use a wrong tool for the job, then you have reworking over a lot more costs. Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of choosing the right tool for the right time for the right purpose. An example is there's a lot of movement towards, as data center consolidation happens, you have to move data out to retool a data center to make it more efficient, to put more infrastructure and all that stuff. Where are you going to put it? Cloud managed services are great opportunities to do that. You can temporarily move your data to the cloud while you retool your data center and then move it back if that's the good business model that you need. It might be cheaper to keep it in the cloud. It might be cheaper to keep it inside your enterprise data center. That depends on how your cost structures are and how you do business. Mm-hmm. So it's a tool that you can use depending on the need, and that's kind of how we view it. Managed services have been around for a long time, and they seem to be coming back a lot more now. They're kind of going away, and they're definitely coming back now, primarily because of these things. It's just another option, and the more options you have, the better you can tailor your solution and your processes to fit the needs.
Right. Well said. Right tool for the right job. Just ordered a big, giant barbecue grill for the house, and to my chagrin, it was delivered in a box. It was not assembled. And when I saw there were 432 screws involved with putting it together, first thing I did is went to the hardware store to buy some high-power screwdrivers and things like that, or so I could actually get the job done. There you go. So good analogy for Darren. Let's switch gears now. Let's talk about challenges, some of the tough stuff, some of the things that are still need to be done, and the hard things that get in the way, the constraints. Let's start with Ray this time, over at Department of State. Ray, what are some of the big challenges yet that you face that you need to overcome in order to get to where you're trying to get?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is the U.S. government itself and the way we do business.
The U.S. government was there to help you.
We are there to help. But there are points at which the help doesn't help. And the process, some of this has been addressed. GSA is addressing it in terms of the acquisition process, the budgeting process, the cycles that we go through. That reduces our agility. So finding ways to be more agile and more capable of responding to changing requirements has been a big challenge. Cost, of course, in the current, budget scenario is complicated. From a consolidation standpoint, following on with cost, it's fund recovery. Right. We talked to Jim about power, and did we measure power? We do measure power, but who pays for the power? Does the building management pay for the power? When I release a data center, do I receive those funds? This has been an ongoing discussion we've had at FDCCI. Right. The other thing, and the last thing, is maintaining the momentum. You can get everybody out on the football football field to get over the goal line when you talk about we're at the 1 yard line
Right.
and we just need one more touchdown, but you can only do that so many times.
Right.
And we've been doing it quite a bit in terms of closing data centers down. So that's a pretty big challenge.
Yeah, it gets tougher the closer you get there. The field gets shorter and smaller, and the folks that are trying to keep things from moving get a little bit tougher. The acquisition process, I'm seeing that a lot too. It's different. I mean, it's a different challenge for different agencies to understand how to go through an acquisition process, especially if you've got multiple component agencies within a larger agency and you're trying to pull them together, and the way the money is appropriated by the Congress causes a lot of conflict. Zach Baldwin, what do you think? What are some of the tough things, the difficult challenges you face trying to move forward with your programs?
Well, the biggest challenge for me, and I think for a lot of people across the government, is cultural. We have a lot of great, technologies out there and everything, but, virtualization and VMs isn't exactly brand new technology that, is being introduced to the group. Delivering enterprise IT, enterprise commodity, enterprise governance of that commodity. Right now, some agencies aren't set up for that, and hopefully, through the memo that just came out in March, we're going to give the CIOs more power across the government to have that enterprise control over their IT. Some people in the bureaus may not be able to reach out and see the blinking lights on their servers anymore and
Right.
be able to touch the box. So that's a big cultural change in the government.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. And we're now 92 for 92. This is our 92nd radio show, and the word culture being a challenge has appeared every single time. I mean, we've had the discussion about it's not the technology, it's the people, the processes, the culture that are some of the most difficult things to overcome. Julie, what do you think? What are some difficult things? Anything you can add to the conversation?
Well, I was just going to say ditto, right? Because it really, at the end of the day, technology is the easy part. It's getting people to adopt new ways to access technology, new ways to leverage the applications that they have. I think the other part is, you mentioned governance as part of the introduction. I mean, governance can be a good thing and a bad thing. People don't want to be stifled by too many rules or processes or too much change. So I think it's really just, showing an example of a success and getting everybody on board to get people to go over the goal line. I think if they see that this organization or this agency has saved millions of dollars, was able to shut down the data center successfully, but still continue their day-to-day activity with much higher efficiency, I think that's what you need to put in front of people as the carrot, because, people resist change more than technology does.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think what's important is to point to success stories as opposed to talk about, this is what we can do. Say, take a look at what was done here or here or here. In some cases, look out to the private sector. Look at some success stories out there where some tremendous benefits have been achieved.
Absolutely.
Tim, what do you think? What are the hard things, the tough things, the challenges?
Well, certainly Juniper can't do much about the cultural issues that some of the agencies are having. We have some things we can control and some things we can't, and that's not one we have much control over.
You don't have like industrial psychiatrists?
No, not at Juniper, no. Not yet. So we tend to focus on the technology or the things that we can control, and the challenges that we see our customers struggling with are things like visibility and security. How do you secure the applications? How do you secure the virtualized environment?
Right.
And that's an area where we spend a fair amount of our resources is just that visibility into the virtualized environment. How do you know what traffic is moving if it stays in a virtual machine, right. As VMs move around? If it doesn't come out and hit a physical firewall or an IPS or something like that to give you that visibility, how do you know what's going on?
Right.
And so that's an area that Juniper is spending a fair amount of time on, is just offering better tools to visualize that traffic.
Yeah, great. Actually, I hope we have a little time in the show to drill down a little bit more on that security question, because I know it is so important in all of these programs. Darren, what do you think? What are some of the tough things, real hard things, challenges that you still need to overcome to get to where you want to get with all this?
Well, I see it in three different areas. So the first area is the traditional stuff that we get from OMB and GAO and the agencies about the difficulty in having an accurate inventory to be able to know where you're going from and to know where you're going to. There's a lot of stuff out there, and it's hard to have accurate information about the volume of servers and storage and networking, the gathering the power and usage efficiency stuff. The Department of State has made great strides compared to a lot of the other agencies. They just don't have the ability to know how much power is coming in and get the power information. The application mapping, the funding to be able to do that stuff, all these things are that first level. The second level, I think, is there's thousands of servers out there with tens of thousands of virtual machines, with hundreds of thousands of applications, with data that you don't necessarily know is it critical data or non-critical data. It's a deer in the headlights moment when you think about how you're going to move it and maintain uptime and not lose anything and not break anything. And this is not fast, easy, or free.
Right.
So it's the complexity that comes in, and partially it's the complexity from, you take the big data side of, documented, undocumented, or structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. Well, I view it as, in the data center, some stuff is documented, some stuff is semi-documented, and some stuff is undocumented, and the complexities of the undocumented, semi-documented, and not really always knowing the impact of a move. Sometimes you don't know it until after you do it, and that can be bad.
Right.
That's another deer in the headlights. It's a lot of work to figure that stuff out.
Right. Go ahead.
The last thing I would say is that there's as data centers are getting consolidated, the applications are going to become more important. There's going to be more users going to the applications that can get consolidated, so that value of that application becomes significantly higher. So the issues around that in terms of SLAs, contractual relationships, those types of things, performance and availability become huge, and trying to figure out the right way to design the infrastructure and the virtualization layer to fit that application model as we move forward. That's a very complex problem as well. And so there's just a lot of complexity and lots of detailed work that has to go into it, and those are the biggest problems, I think.
Yeah, very excellent points. And the reason I was asking Ray about powers, there are actually programs out there where the power companies will pay for some infrastructure and for some, if you have the ability to measure specifically your cost, and then they use share and savings programs in order to be paid back. They'll do the upfront investment and be paid back by the energy savings. But the problem, I'm aware where it's been done in a couple agencies, but I'm aware of many other agencies where they weren't able to get the baseline numbers correct to understand exactly what the savings would be, and it's held the program back. But nevertheless, there are some creative things out there, and hopefully, as we talked about earlier, as we streamline, consolidate, and simplify and make things more understandable, get better metrics, better data, then some of these other creative approaches for additional types of improvements may come back into play. We brought up security. It's come up a couple times. I think we need to spend a couple minutes talking about security in consolidated data centers. But before we do that, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. To the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Ray Browl from the Department of State, Zach Baldwin from GSA, Darren House from Unicom Federal, Tim LeMaster from Juniper, and Julie Lockner from Informatica. We're talking data center consolidation, virtualization. We've talked about benefits, progress, challenges. And one thing that I bump into quite often is people raising issues around security. Is security going to be improved, or is security going to be a bigger challenge? Are we moving by consolidating? There's one general comment says, well, if you had 20 data centers, your target is 20. If you have 2, now you have far less, now you have more risk, because if you lose one of those 2, you no longer have a backup. Those kinds of questions. Tim, you brought the security up, so let's start with you this time. How do you address security, and how do you see security in consolidated data centers?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's something that's on top of mind of everybody that's using data center consolidation and virtualized environments, cloud computing, all those. So Juniper focuses on security in a couple different angles. There's the physical security aspects of it, which we try to address through scalable firewall solutions, scalable services that provide greater visibility into that data, but also how to secure that virtual data. I talked earlier about the challenges that virtualization creates in terms of how data is visible to these physical security appliances that we've all become to rely upon in a data center environment. And so if data never leaves the virtual world, it stays within VMs from one VM to another, and stays within that virtual world, then you can't expose it to the policies and the inspection that you're accustomed to getting for that data. That creates a challenge. It just doesn't give you the understanding or the comfort that that there's no malware, there's nothing propagating through your application set. And so one of the things that Juniper's done is to bring products to market that allow you to get visibility into that data by operating at the hypervisor level, with staying within the virtual machine and providing firewall services there and visibility into that data while it's in the virtual world. And of course, the other area is just managing the sheer volume of events that come from a large data center. There are thousands of devices creating, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of events. You've got to find some way to distill that event data down into a manageable volume that you can review, and so event correlation becomes a big part of that, or secure event management becomes a big part of that solution as well.
Right, terrific. Zach Baldwin, what do you think? How do you address the security question here?
I think as you consolidate applications into a common environment, you're able to better draw a perimeter around your applications and security. GSA has done some good work in kicking off FedRAMP to try to bring some common security to right now cloud applications, but that's a whole other conversation too in the FedRAMP. But I think that as we're using more cloud, as we're using more virtualized environments, we're actually getting better at having a holistic security plan for your environments.
Yeah, I agree with you. In my mind, over the years we have built up so many Band-Aid solutions to security. I mean, we've been fixing things as they break. We react to things when we have problems, and there are so many different security solutions now in the infrastructure. Going to cloud gives you a chance to step back and say, are there some solutions now that we can get away with get rid of some of these old Band-Aids and go to a much more common solution. What do you think, Ray? Makes sense to you? Does that sound right?
Security is a very, very high priority at the Department of State, with 380 or plus embassies worldwide in every single country on the face of the earth, and our network stretches into all of those. Security is a very, very high priority issue for us. We handle security in a virtualized environment the same way we do in any environment, and that is, first of all, we concern ourselves with physical security in depth. Our data centers are guarded by armed guards, things like that, in case something happens, just like our embassies overseas are. And then network security, perimeter security is a high priority issue for us. And it's an important issue because as we grow in our capacity to offer citizen services and diplomacy throughout the world, that external network access is growing almost quicker than our internal network. So the DMZ security and so forth is extremely important. Server security, we just do the same thing. So we have our security templates, and we approach FISMA very seriously, information assurance of the Department of State, to ensure that we have that in place. Finally, we have pretty comprehensive personnel security to ensure that we have the right people accessing the right data.
Right. So essentially the same model, just being applied to a slightly different environment or set of infrastructure. We're approaching about 12 minutes or so to go in the show, and one thing that we really enjoy doing is talking a little bit about the future. We've talked about progress, benefits, challenges, security issues today and what we're doing, but it's nice to try to have some picture or vision on where all this is going. What's it going to look like down the road? What improvements will we see for the government? Why are we doing this? And what kinds of things do we envision? So it's time to put on sort of like, take a look into your crystal ball and try to picture what it's going to all turn out to down the road. And let's start with Darren House over at Unicom Government. Darren, what's it all look like for you? Where's this all going?
The future is bright.
Okay.
I'll start with that. I think that there's a lot of good opportunity. I am continually reminded about how lucky I am to be working in this industry at this time, where there's so many interesting and fun problems to solve, and some great technologies and great companies out there to use to solve those technologies. I believe if the IT Acquisition Reform Act does get enacted in any manner whatsoever, that will drive a lot faster adoption of things like shared services, of data center consolidation, of digital government, of all these different things that will help provide a better environment at a lower cost, that you can have increased security, increased agility with lower cost. You can do more with less. So that's part of what I think, if this thing gets passed, and I hope it does in some level, I believe that there's going to be more hybrid virtual and physical management environments that are cloud-based to be able to manage the infrastructure. One of the big problems is it costs a lot more to have a physical environment, a virtual environment, and a cloud environment. That management overhead and complexity of those things creates a cost and risk issues. If you can find tools that are the one tool to rule them all,
right,
that you can manage these environments in different places, where you can provision your storage and your networking and your cloud environment and your server environment, these help reduce costs and reduce risk and make the operational efficiency that much better. These things are coming about. There's companies out there that have some things they're tying in with Amazons and Terramarks and all these things. They're tying in with storage provisioning and network provisioning, so that there's going to be that management interface that makes it easier for you. I think converged infrastructures will be the clear winner in the data center environment for being able to optimize and provide agility from the hardware and virtualization level. Converged infrastructures, I think, are fantastic. They do have a better TCO and ROI for them,
sure,
and they will be the winners in the data center, I believe. And lastly, I think the financial and contractual issues, which are the big ones for cloud, for data center consolidation, for SLAs, for other people not having access to their physical access to their data, they'll be managed, and there'll be new innovative consumption models that come about because of this that will create some interesting opportunities.
Excellent. Well said. Good points there. Julie Lockner at Informatica, what's the future look like for you? Where's this all going?
Well, I think what we're starting to see just in this conversation, that innovation has changed the way that people consume technology from a physical layer to a virtual layer. But we're still talking about at the data center layer. I see where the future is headed is really around the data layer and the application layer. The data is going to become more liquid. It's going to become virtualized, and there's going to be a need for more of this virtual integrated platform or data integration platform. And what that allows you to do is basically, no matter what technology you're on, whether you're in a cloud or an island or you're on a physical server, that the business user is allowed to access the data, query the information, do their business processes, do their analytics, solve crime, but do it in a way that's secure, in a way that's cost efficient, in a way that doesn't impact our national security. Mm-hmm. And the only way that you can do that is if you start abstracting the application, the data layer from the physical layer. And I think that the innovations are going in that direction. We see that happening at Informatica on a real-time basis.
Terrific. You know, you see when anytime there are initiatives like this, it does spark innovation in the private sector, because people know that we've got to, we want to get out in front of the curve here and get in front of the competition, so it sparks innovation. Tim LeMaster and Juniper, where's this all going?
Well, one of the areas that we think is really going to have a big impact here is, this concept of software-defined X, software-defined networking, software-defined service delivery, just the impact that software orchestration and the processes around that will have on how a business responds, and the agility that it has available to respond to new services, to applications that need to be delivered and that sort of thing, and the impact that automation is going to have on that. We all know that data analytics, big data analytics, is not going to go away anytime soon. There's more data available, more sources of video and sensor information that has to be analyzed, has to be consumed. And this software is going to allow software, in this case, as it relates to Juniper, software-defined networking, or what's called SDN, is going to facilitate that. It may not be called SDN in 10 years. Right. It may be, maybe the word SOA is going to come back in 10 years. I don't know. But software-defined networking is really going to change the way networks provide services for data centers. Yeah,
terrific. Well said. Zach Baldwin, what's it look like for you? You're looking sort of horizontally across government here. So what's the future look like down the road?
I think we're just getting to a point, through the federal CIOs, through the 24-agency Data Center Consolidation Task Force, that we've kind of changed the course of where we're going with IT. I don't think anyone can deny that the days of one app on one server running at 10 to 15% utilization are over at this point. So as we move forward here, I think agencies are just going to move more towards enterprise delivered services, looking at the best value from core data centers in optimized environments. In the future, hopefully here as we identify the core data centers, the task force is going to develop metrics around energy, facility usage, storage, and cost per OS that we can actually see how you're stacking up against other core data centers and how you stack up against, if you can't beat prices in the cloud, then people are going to start going to the cloud. So like Ray said, if everyone goes to the cloud, the data center guys aren't going to
Yeah, right.
Optimizing your data center is going to be important here, and knowing what your costs are.
Working yourself out of a job.
And even in the future, as agencies become better at delivering these enterprise services, chargebacks, and things like that, hopefully see a lot more true sharing of commodity IT across agencies. And between agencies.
Right. So we actually are starting to tear down some of those silos and stovepipes and the movements. It's clearly we're moving in that direction. How far we get, we shall see. Ray Brow, Department of State. What's it look like for you, Ray? Where's this all going? What's your end vision look like out there?
Well, speaking of stovepipes and so forth, I was working with an organization a month ago that didn't call them stovepipes. They called them pillars, which I thought was an interesting euphemism for a stovepipe.
I'm on record explaining a stovepipe. I testified in front of Congressman Horn one time, and he said, I hear this, people come up here and say stovepipe. What does that mean? And so I actually on record in congressional testimony explaining to Congressman Horn about the old stoves. But anyway, sorry about that.
Smoke in the stovepipe. So our focus will be, in some senses, what it has been over the last few years through our virtualization effort, and that is, and we've heard it a number of times today, a focus on service delivery. If we're going to break down stovepipes, many of which are legitimate, the delivery of services in a stovepipe, you can control the stovepipe, you can ensure that the delivery of services is there. What you can't do is consolidate it and have centralized management. It changes your security. So we have focused on delivering the same level or better of service that you have in your stovepipe. And I see that as continuing, and that's the way we've attempted to attack the culture issue. Julie hit a number of times on the application inventory. If we are going to move forward with addressing the application inventory, which is fundamental, it's because we can prove as the data center that we can deliver the level of service that the organization requires. In terms of one other issue that we didn't discuss, and probably it's been the topic of multiple programs, is the whole issue of mobility. We have to put the data and put the processing in the hands of the folks where they are. Right. So I see mobility and the capacity to bring the data down and the processing down to people as being a fundamental driving component of what we do, which leads to the other the bane of this, and that's the whole security issue. Sure. The security issue is not going to get simpler. It is only going to become more complex as our environments become more complex, as mobility increases, as the amount of data increases. As we look at different alternatives like cloud, security is going to become an increasingly complicated and troublesome situation for all of us. So just to kind of summarize, I don't see our costs necessarily going down as we've all hoped, because simultaneously with our consolidation, the demands for services are also increasing. Right. You can't deliver necessarily increased services at lower cost always. Simultaneously with that, our environment is becoming more complex. So when you have budgets flat and you have complexity and you have demand for services going up, I don't think I need to worry too much about my data center going away to the cloud. Yeah,
well said, and great dialogue panel. I enjoyed this one a lot. Let me do a couple quick summary remarks here. We talked about progress, 420 closed so far. That sounds like progress. We do know that there are some hiccups along the way, and there are some challenges getting there, but nevertheless, we're moving in the right direction. A point was brought out about the importance of planning before actually moving. Benefits, we had the obvious one where cost, but also energy savings. We viewed security maybe in the data center, anyway, in the data center portion of it, of being an opportunity since you get a handle on it. Centralized management, simplifying processes, eliminating a lot of wasteful applications that are not needed. With cloud, we came across as cost is the driver. You take a look at cost. Does it make sense or not? If it does, you go one way. If not, you don't. But there are benefits there with chargeback and better data and some things like that, which will help for improvement. We have the old challenges that are always out there, acquisition processes and SLAs. It's different. There's different approaches. It's going to require acquisition folks to re-educate about how to do things. We talked about some upfront investment costs. When a budget's like this, if you need money to do the upfront work, it's going to be, you have to be very creative getting it. Keeping momentum is a challenge, and keeping this as a high priority. And then, of course, the big one, the big culture issues. Security we viewed as an opportunity. The future, we had some great dialogue about where things are going. I kind of see it as, as we get to where we are, part one data center consolidation, could that lead to consolidation of those consolidated centers? And down the road, maybe government agencies focus strictly on their mission while IT is a utility. With the mobility, I know one thing, we got to get that one solved before our kids get into the workplace, because they're going to expect mobility. I want to thank our panelists for taking time from their busy schedules to be with us and share this information.